we're going to be replacing brake pads. I've got my friend Steven Aldacco here, and we're going to be working on his 2008 Yamaha wr250x dual sport motorcycle. So let's get started. Alright, so now we're going to go over the tools that you're going to need to get this job done. First and most importantly, you're going to need a socket set to get your calipers off of your bike. Next, you're also going to need an Allen key set. In our case, the rear brake calipers are taken off with this, so you may or may not need them depending on your application. Needle nose pliers always come in handy. Flathead screwdriver, you never know what you're going to need that for. Also, it's really important to keep your brakes clean. This is what's going to stop you. Could possibly save your life. So we're going to get everything really clean. It's really cheap to pick up some brake cleaner at your local auto parts store. Get a nice wire brush so you can scrape off all that dirt and grime and stuff. Maybe some brake buildup. One last piece, zip ties or a bungee cable. Now these are actually used to hold the calipers up. Once you've taken them off the bike, we're not going to be disconnecting our brake lines because we don't want to work with brake fluid. There's no need, we're just replacing pads. But you can't let those calipers hang off the brake lines because they're just made out of rubber and it could damage them. Again, puts you at risk. So we're going to use these to hold the calipers up off the ground while we get our work done. We're going to start with our rear brakes first. You may notice that the bolt attaching the caliper onto the bike has already been removed. This is unnecessary and you don't need to do this. Just start by taking out this little locking bolt with a flathead screwdriver. Now as you take parts off the bike, it's important to keep every piece organized. I use a simple plastic box like this one to hold all my parts. So far we've got the bolt holding the caliper onto the bike and the little locking pin we just removed. With those off the bike and organized, we can now take out the bolt which actually holds the brake pads in the caliper. An Allen key makes this an easy job. Just a few quick turns and you'll have that bolt out. Now as we pull this bolt out, we're keeping it organized as well in our box. Now with all the bolts out, a pair of needle nose pliers makes removing the brake pads very simple. Pad number 2. Look at all that buildup. It's a good thing we're replacing them with a new set of pads. Now before you put new brake pads on the bike, it's important to cover them with brake lubricant. Only on the back side of the pad where metal will be touching the caliper, but it's important to do this step. Just going to give it a little squeeze and spread it around the back of the brake pad with our finger so that we get a nice even coating. Now we'll place the brake pad into the caliper, making sure it fits into the right position. Lube up our second brake pad, smear it around, and place this pad in the caliper as well. Now this is a very important step. You want to make sure everything goes into the brake pad exactly as it is designed. So don't skip out on spending time making sure you get this part right. Make sure everything is locked correctly into place before continuing. Now we'll take out that locking bolt from our organization box and place it into the caliper, running it through the hole in our brake pads, making sure they're locked into the correct position. We'll use our Allen key again to tighten that bolt down, making sure it's nice and snug. We'll add our locking pin back in with our flathead screwdriver, and the rear brakes are done. Now we're going to get started on our front brakes. The first thing we're going to do is loosen the bolts holding the caliper onto the bike itself. Next, we'll use our bungee cord, making sure to attach it to a metal piece on the caliper, not the rubber hoses, in order to suspend the caliper off the air once removed. And we'll finish taking our bolts out. Then we'll gently slide the caliper off of the brake disc. make sure it hangs gently without any weight on that rubber hose. Then we'll remove the bolt holding the brake pads in place, just as was done on the rear calipers. And you can see the difference between old and new pads here. Now we're going to insert the new brake pads into the caliper. We've used brake lubricant just as was done on the rears on any part of the pad which is going to come in contact with the caliper. I'm using the bolt which holds the brake pads in place, just slid part way through in order to hold the first brake pad in place. This is because the brake pads on this bike on the front are inserted upside down and would fall out otherwise. Once both pads are in, we'll push the bolt through, making sure it's holding both of the brake pads in place, and give it a couple turns with our fingers just so it doesn't fall out while we're sliding the caliper back onto the bike. We'll put the caliper back on the bike with pads on either side of the brake disc, and tighten down that bolt just a little bit to make sure those pads are held in place. We'll reattach our calipers with the two bolts we previously removed. Tighten them down with our socket, and then we'll finish tightening down that bolt holding the pads in place. Lastly, we'll reinsert the little locking bolt just as was removed on the back again with our flathead screwdriver, and then you're done. Oh, and take off the bungee cord.
Get down lower. Perfect. Yeah.
Alright, so now we're going to go over the tools that you're going to need for this job. First, and most importantly, you're going to need a socket set so that you can get your brake calipers off of the bike. You're also going to need a hex kit. Allen key?
Allen key set.
Allen key set.
Restart?
Yeah, you click it.